came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" When asking this question, he's actually referring to himself. He's actually asking the question, "Who do people say that I am? Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they replied, "Well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." In verse 15, he asks this question. He says, "But what about you?" He asked. "Who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answered, he says, "You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you're Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell or Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth, you will bind in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Last week I began a series on a subject that I've entitled, "Why Jesus?" Why Jesus? Why Jesus above everything else? Why Jesus above any other gods or any other religion or any other belief system or any other beliefs? Why Jesus above everything else? Why Jesus in your life? Why Jesus at all? Why Jesus? And we begun that last week, and we were looking at the woman at the well in John chapter 4, and our first answer was that Jesus has everything that you need. We were singing that today, "You're all I need." Jesus has, he is everything that you will ever need in this life. And in this particular story that we've just read, let me explain what's going on. Jesus has taken his disciples on a bit of a field trip, and they've gone to a region called Caesarea Philippi. And in Caesarea Philippi, you can still go there today, there's this cave. And what used to happen, back in the day, whenever Jesus was there would have been this temple that would have been built around that cave in Israel. And he brings them to this place in Caesarea Philippi, and this is the place where this question is asked: "Who are people saying that I am?" And he gathers them together and he asks them this question: "Who do people say I am?" Because Jesus knows there's a lot of talk going about Israel about me. Everybody was talking about Jesus. Everybody knew, because everybody knew him, knew about him. They knew the miracles that he was doing. They knew the preaching that was taking place, the amount of followers that he was getting. Jesus was the talk of Israel and even beyond Israel. Everybody was talking about Jesus, and everybody had an opinion. And they respond and they answer, "Well, some are saying that you're John the Baptist." Now, just for the record, John the Baptist was beheaded and John the Baptist wasn't alive. But they're saying, some are saying you're John the Baptist, some are saying you're Elijah or Jeremiah or one of the Old Testament prophets. So they're going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And people have this in their mind that this man Jesus that's walking among us today is actually Elijah that's come back from the dead, or John the Baptist come back from the dead, or Jeremiah from hundreds of years ago. These were the opinions that people had about Jesus. And then Jesus asked the disciples this question: "What about you? What about you?" That's a question I want to ask you today. What about you? What do you say about Jesus? Because this is the most significant question that anybody can ever answer in life. What about you? What do you say about this man Jesus? Because Jesus Christ is actually an historical figure. Jesus Christ actually lived on this earth 2,000 years ago. It's kind of crazy that we have time is defined by Jesus, because you've got before Christ. We've got years BC, before Christ, and then AD. And time is defined by Jesus. I don't think there was ever a baby that was ever born quite like Jesus Christ. Whenever he was born in Bethlehem, there were kings that came from the east to bring these gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh to give to this little baby. When does that ever happen? Shepherds are telling stories of having been visited by angels in the fields, and they're proclaiming about this baby that has been born in Bethlehem. There was never a baby that was born quite like Jesus. As the kings from the east come in, then they approach the king of Israel, King Herod, and they're saying to him, "Where is this king that has been born, this little baby called Jesus?" And Herod begins to research the scriptures, the Old Testament scriptures, because there are tons and tons and tons of scriptures there of prophecies about a future coming Messiah. And the kings are coming from the east with their gifts, and they're asking questions about this baby that has been born. And Herod sends his people and says, go and find out, where's he to be born? What's the crack here? What's going on? And they come back and say, well, he's going to be born in Bethlehem. Well, that's roughly what these kings were saying, Bethlehem. Okay, and he sends out an edict and a proclamation, kill all the baby boys under the age of 2 who have been born around that area. There was never a baby that was born quite like Jesus. There has never been anyone in history, I don't think, that has been discussed about more, talked about more, argued over more, books written about any more than Jesus Christ, books read. The Bible is the biggest selling book in all of history. What about you? What do you say about this man that walked on this earth 2,000 years ago? His first question, from Jesus' first question, is, what do people say I am? Who do people say I am? What are people saying about me? What are people talking about me? And then the second question is, what about you? You see, the first question is about the crowd. The first person is a collective. The second question is actually more individual. Because what happens in life is that we tend to follow the crowd. Well, let's see what everybody else is doing. And in order to fit in, we follow the crowd. There are many men that are a part of this church that joined a paramilitary organization because their friends joined that paramilitary organization. And in order to belong, and in order to connect, and in order to fit in, they signed up. And we do a lot of stuff in life just to fit in, just to connect, just to be a part of the crowd. We follow the crowd. Well, everybody else is doing it. Whenever the question should be, what about you? What about you? And the crowd will have an opinion about Jesus. Your friends, your family members, people you like, people you don't like, people in work, will all have an opinion about Jesus. The crowd will have an opinion. But what about you? What do you say about Jesus? Because it really comes down to a few different things that people can come to a conclusion about this man called Jesus Christ, because he was either a crazy lunatic, or he was a genius, a great leader, a good teacher, or he was the Messiah. But I think that we can actually narrow that down to two things. He was either a crazy lunatic, or he was the Messiah. At the end of this, whenever Peter says, you're the Christ, you're the Messiah, then Jesus responds by saying, yes, I am. And he tells his disciples, don't be telling anybody who I am. He was keeping that quiet for one reason or another. I'm not going to go into that today. And Peter comes up with this answer. You're the Christ. You're the Messiah. You see, the reason he can't be both the Messiah and just a good person or just a good teacher is that he can't be both. He can't be one or the other. Because if he's just a good teacher, if your conclusion is, well, he was a good teacher and a good leader, but he wasn't the Messiah, then that means he can't have been a good teacher or a good leader because he was a liar. Because he claimed to be the Messiah. So if he's claiming to be the Messiah and your conclusion is he's not the Messiah, then he can't be a good person, he can't be a good teacher because he lied. So I think your only alternatives are, this man Jesus that was on this earth a couple of thousand years ago was either a lunatic, an absolute crazy man who lied, who deceived, but at the same time a genius because he got people to follow him, or he was the Messiah. Now that causes some of you some problems in this place, because you've got to then decide, what do I do with this man Jesus? Because either he was the Messiah or he was crazy. And that in itself, whenever you think about Jesus and about what he was able to do, he was able to get fishermen to leave their jobs, to walk away from their boats and from their nets and to follow him, to leave their livelihood, to leave their only source of income, not just to follow him, but to actually die for him. These men died for him. These men were fishermen. These men were hard, rugged men. These were big men. These were like Barzo and Tony sitting back there with their arms folded like a couple of bouncers. That's who Peter and James and John and Andrew were. They were big, physical, hard men doing some hard graft in their days. And Jesus comes up to them and tells them, says, follow me. And they leave everything behind. They follow Jesus and they die for him. Peter gets crucified upside down. I mean, there must have been for me something in this man, Jesus, that would cause these men not just to follow him, but to die for him. And for me, my conclusion, similar to Peter, is that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. He's the Son of God. He's the one who came from heaven, the one who died on a cross, and the one who rose again from the dead, who ascended into heaven, and who will one day, I believe, very, very soon return to this earth for his church, for his bride. And we have got to be ready. Jesus made many claims that he was the Messiah. We've just read one there in Matthew chapter 16 last week. We read from John chapter 4 in this interaction that Jesus has with the woman at the well. And the woman at the well begins to talk about the Messiah. We've heard that the Messiah is coming. He might even be here. And Jesus responds with, I'm the one. I'm the Messiah. It's me. And Jesus made many claims. Some people say, well, Jesus never claimed to be the Messiah. He did on multiple occasions. And that was the reason why Jesus was put to death, because the religious people didn't believe him. They said he's making false claims. This is blasphemous, that he's not really the Messiah. We need to put him to death. Doesn't even look like a Messiah. Doesn't sound like a Messiah. He's born in Bethlehem. He's a carpenter. He's the son of Mary and Joseph. This cannot be our Messiah. He is a blasphemer. Let's get him and let's put him to death. And that's what they did. But Jesus claimed to be the Messiah. Why Jesus? Because of who he is. And we're going to expound on this at some point later on in the weeks to come. But let me just finish off with this. Because this is the reason why, for me, one of the reasons why Jesus. In Ephesians chapter 1, in the Message version, we read these words. It says, it's in Christ that we find out who we are and what we're living for. It's in Christ that we find out who we are and what we're living for. I think that the greatest two things that we could ever discover in our life is our identity, our true identity, and our true purpose. One of the problems that I'm going to share with you in just a second, one of the problems in life is that things come in, things with the crowd that will attach themselves to us, that will suck us in, that will cause us to go down a path that was never intended for us in the first place. And as a result of going down that path, we end up with a false identity and a false purpose that we believe at the time is true. But because it hasn't been from God, it's not. And it takes us down a road that we never ever wanted to go down in the first place. And we end up in a place that we never ever wanted to be in the first place. And so what Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus, to the Ephesians, and he's telling them, and he's telling us today, it's in Christ that you will find your true identity and your true purpose. Last week, why Jesus? Because he's got everything that we need. Today, why Jesus? Because it's in him we will find our true identity and our true purpose. Growing up in this community, Shankill community, Ballysillan, North, West Belfast, it doesn't matter. We have all been in the same boat where we have been put into places that we never wanted to go and where we never wanted to be. Life has this way of dragging us down. Life has this way of pulling us down, and life has this way of trying to attack and of trying to destroy and trying to steal our identity and our purpose. We spoke last week about a guy called Maslow. Maslow has this hierarchy of needs. It'll be on the screen here. He's got 5 of them, and it's a hierarchy, so it kind of starts at the bottom. From physiological needs, very simple needs like being able to breathe, being able to eat, being able to drink water, stuff like that. They're very simple, basic needs, but yet still very, very essential. And then he said that the next level up is safety, this need to feel safe and secure. And he talks about jobs and employment and career and that need to feel safe and secure. And in the third one, he talks about belonging. And this for me is a big one because we all are looking to belong to something. We are all looking to connect. We are all looking to be a part of something. And so we want to belong. We're looking for family, for friends, something that we can connect with. And then he goes on to self-esteem, this need to feel like I'm okay, this need to feel complete and secure, going into self-actualization, that you're doing something with your life. And so he talks about all of these needs, and he expounds on these needs. And what I've discovered that in life, and what I believe is that every single one of these needs is found in Jesus Christ. That the more we try to find these needs in and of ourselves, the more we will feel. But whenever we turn to Jesus Christ, who we've just talked about and who we've just read about, then you will find those needs met in Him. But life has a way of dragging those away, and of attacking and of destroying. And what I've found from my life, this is why Jesus for me. And this is what I love about Ephesians chapter 1. It's in Christ that we find out who we are and what we're living for, identity and purpose. Let me share just a very quick story before I finish, just about me. And I've shared this many, many times. Well, not many, many times, but I've shared this a few times. And it kind of started, I grew up in a very secure, we had safety in our home. Until you started to fight with paramilitaries, and then we didn't have so much safety after that. And but growing up, as a kid, growing up in church, growing up in a Christian home, we had safety, we had security, and we had a good life growing up. Something changed, and it's crazy how subtle things can change in life. I went to the boys' model, and I remember in third year, this is roughly 1990, and we went into a room in the boys' model school with Mr. Banks and Mr. Blaine. And what we were to do in that classroom is we were to pick our subjects for GCSEs. I was in third year. We were picking our subjects. And we've got this list of all the subjects that we were wanting to pick, what you have to pick. And as I'm looking down through this list, I began to question in my mind, how do I know what subjects to pick? And as that question came into my mind, and I'm thinking I better ask Banksy or Mr. Blaine here what the crack is and what do I choose, someone else asked the question, sir, how do you know what subjects to pick? That stage you're maybe thinking, well, if Miss Cinnamon's still about, then we'll pick the subject that Miss Cinnamon's going to be teaching. Some of you maybe remember Miss Cinnamon. And that wasn't the answer. Don't base it, based on how good looking a teacher is. What he says is you base your choice of subjects on what you want to do with your life, on what you want to be whenever you leave school. And as he answered that question on how to choose subjects, I'm standing there and I'm thinking, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to be? At the age of 13, 14, I didn't have a clue. And I thought at the age of 13, 14 that you should. And I didn't. And it caused me issues. As I'm standing there with that sheet of paper, I'll never forget it, at Boys Model School, and I'm trying to think, okay, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I just picked subjects, because I didn't know. And we left, and what began to happen in my mind was I began to realize, what? Every summer, you get off school in June, you spend a couple of months running about the streets, running about the parks, playing football, whatever, and then in September you go back to school, and I'm beginning to realize I'm coming into my last years of school. And I'm going to be finished very soon. I've just got a couple of years left. I can leave school. What am I going to do? Well, why am I here? Why am I on this earth? And the more that I asked that question, the less of an answer I had for that question. Identity and purpose began to be attacked in my life. And there were three things that happened in 1992 that actually pretty much had me contemplating suicide and stuff like that, just because I had come to a conclusion in my life that there was no point in me being here. There's no reason, there's no rhyme or reason to me being here on this earth. February of 1992, Andrew Johnson gets shot. He was killed. We shared this loads of times. Really good friend. Really, really good friend. Amazing kid. Absolutely brilliant kid. And somebody walks into his video store. He was working that night on a Monday evening and puts a gun to him and shoots him and kills him. And at this stage in my life, I'm like, even before this happens, I was at a stage where I was like, there's no point in me being here. But whenever this takes place, and this happens to a kid from church who was such a brilliant kid, and I'm thinking, what's the point in living if it's just the troubles, and this person's dying, and that person's dying, and your best mate's dying, and all this other stuff is going on? Well, what's the point in even staying here? What's the point in being here? And this is the conclusions that I was coming to. Many of us in this place have had to deal with death of loved ones, with death of those that have been close to us, and trying to, even years later, come to terms with that. There were two other changes that took place that maybe at the time didn't seem as significant, but whenever I look back, I begin to realize how significant that they were. Because at that stage, whenever Andy got shot, that year, my dad was leaving the church to come down in full time into the stadium, and everything changed within the church. And this was a church that I had grown up in from the age of about 6 to 16. And the youth group began to disintegrate, partly because of what happened and partly because of the changes that were taking place in the church. And then we moved home from Springvale round to Clareglen. And I'd moved away from my friends. So everything that I knew, everything that I had safety and security in Maslow's hierarchy of needs was all gone. The belonging was all gone. Everything had been disintegrated. And to a kid that was already questioning why he was even on this earth, was brought to a stage where I'm thinking, you know what? I shouldn't be here. It would be better if I wasn't here. Because these are needs that we have in life that Maslow touched on, but I believe that these needs are best met in Jesus Christ. And I went through that year struggling with identity and purpose, and a year or two before that there, and a few years afterwards, because at the age of 19 I'd come to a conclusion and got through those 3 years. In 1995 I went to Canada, and just to cut a long story short, God met with me. And God totally transformed and changed my life in Canada in June 1995. And what I discovered is that there is a plan and a purpose with God. 3 people who didn't know each other, who didn't know me, came up to me in Canada and they says to me, Johnny, God's got a plan and a purpose for your life. This was the stuff I was struggling with. God didn't have a plan and a purpose for my life, that I shouldn't even be here, that I would be better off out of the picture. 3 people come up and they say, Johnny, God's got a plan and a purpose for your life. And what I discovered through Ephesians chapter 1, it's in Christ that we find out who we are, identity. Your identity will only be found, your true identity will only ever be found in Jesus Christ. Your true purpose in life will only ever be found in Jesus Christ. And what happens as we grow up in this community, that other things come in. Over the last number of weeks, we've been praying for a lot of kids, and we're about to pray for little Milani and little Renz. 2 kids that will grow up in Ballysillan, or maybe Spain, I don't know. But things will come in to try to distract these little ones. And they will have parents who will guide them, protect them, watch over them. And we do what we can to make sure that life doesn't hurt them, but life ultimately will. And we're going to be praying over little Harper next week, and the same thing applies as we try to protect our children, but life will come in. And the only thing that I can say to you today, that as you leave this place, as I come to a close, that I ask the question, what about you? When it comes to Jesus Christ, what about you? Because it's only in Jesus Christ where these little ones, along with us, as we're seeking our identity and purpose and place in this world, that it will only ever be found truly and rightly in Jesus Christ. I trust and pray today that after everything you've been through in your life, that you will find Jesus Christ in this place. And once you find him, once you allow him to catch hold of your life, things change. Things change. And I can guarantee you it's the most amazing life that you could ever live when you come into that relationship with him. What about you? What about you? What are you going to do with Jesus? The most significant question that you could answer in your life. And I just trust and pray that you will take that question serious, that you will come to the conclusion like Peter did, like I have, like so many people in this room here today. You're the Christ. You're the Messiah. You're the Son of the living God. You're the one who was, the one who is, and the one who is to come again. You're the one who died for me. You're the one who rose again. You're the one who ascended into heaven. You're the one who watches over me. Thank you for your plans and your purposes, Lord. Thank you for identity in you.